Our memories are more than just our past. They define our very self, our very identity is encapsulated in those memories. And the question of when do we stop being us when we lose those memories is a really complicated question. Imagine if you woke up in some rehabilitation center with your memories erased by some futuristic cyber attack that basically erased your memory, killed your husband, and the company who is handling your rehabilitation is the same company who invented the technology that was weaponized against you by some terrorist group. And now you're left here trying to understand who you are, who you were, and how you cope losing someone that you never even knew. How do you handle that? How do you understand who you are? These are the questions that Fox, our main character in Welcome to Forever, has to deal with. They're reckoning with the loss of their partner, the loss of their very self, and at the same time trying to understand the situation that he's in versus the situation that is being communicated to him. For me, this was an extremely enticing premise for a book. Couple that with the really stylish writing of Nathan Tavers, and you very quickly have a book that is just extremely engrossing. I knew early on that this book could very easily be an all-time favorite, easily a favorite of the year, 5-star read. And that really raised my expectations extremely high. Whether or not the book actually managed to meet those expectations, to handle this world that he's created fairly effectively in a successful way, that's the question. And if you're intrigued by this premise, by this setup, stick around and listen to my entire review of Welcome to Forever by Nathan Tavers. So naturally, this is a dystopian future where basically body hopping or body swapping can occur. Memories are sort of recorded and naturally also by that extent can be erased. It's not entirely clear what the technology is that enabled his memory to be erased. Something happened that caused his memory to be erased and his husband to die in this cyber attack. And basically what he's doing is trying to reflect on his history by grasping on to fragments of memories that are left. And it's a really intriguing question this novel is trying to address of who is this person, and can he even be said to be the same person when only has a fragments of memories that don't even feel like his own. And even as he manages to sort of get his hands on more memories, a larger swath of his own history, it's still this bigger question of, is he the same person? Can he ever be the same person? These are really intriguing ideas. I think the novel is fairly mature in handling. But the question of what makes us us and how much of ourself can we lose before we stop being ourselves is a really muddled question. And I feel like that's sort of the direction that Tavers chooses to go when it comes to this question of who is Fox? Is Fox the same person? Can he ever be someone new? It's a question that's never really directly addressed. Rather, it's left sort of open-ended and sort of in a way that I think is meant to allude to the fact that the question itself is just fundamentally muddled. There is no real answer. But with that said, unfortunately, it left me feeling personally that there was missed opportunity here. There was such an intriguing setup here about the idea of identity, and I wanted that conversation, the philosophical reflection sort of, to be a more dominant part of the story. It's unfortunate that that's not the direction that Tavers chose to take, because really I think it took a great story and made it just good. It's a solid story that I really enjoyed, but I have this fundamental critique of feeling like it could have done more with this world it's created. In some ways, I think this book got its word in the stick because I'm reading this book a month or so after I read another book with a very similar premise, Womb City by Toto Tomasi, basically set in a dystopian future with body swapping, the ability to create simulations, read minds, erase minds, change one's own memories and identity of self or idea of self, and exploring those themes. Well, that book, I think, while it's really well crafted, the way it addressed the themes were way too heavy-handed in a way that this book manages to do better. Perhaps that's because this book is more abstract in how it addresses these ideas, but it definitely does that better. But the difference here is in this book, that is to say Womb City, we have a world that is very deliberately reflecting, I think, more realistic future where these technologies exist. Welcome to Forever wants to have this one world. That is to say Nathan Tavers wants to have this futurist world where there are questions about, the motivations of this company and whether or not we can really trust a company that is fundamentally capitalist with this type of technology. And it has individuals who are clearly driven by their own ego and ambition. And so that conversation of capitalistic endeavors is there. But I feel like, as with the themes of identity, it's not really thoroughly invested in. It's possible that you could argue that it's there on the peripheral, but it's not really highlighted as an essential part of this world. And the reality is that sometimes we like to imagine that these futuristic technologies will solve all the world's problems. But the reality is we live in a capitalistic society driven by greed, desire for money, and of course, systems of oppression, people in power, whether it be monetarily or through other types of privileges, where they want to weaponize that to maintain that system of power. And what's really going to happen is that if we get these technologies, it won't cause those inequalities to stop existing. It'll just, it'll become a new tool for people in power to use against those who are already oppressed. It'll become like a mechanism of oppression that really just reflects the system that already exists. Through a new mechanism. Womb City understands that. Unfortunately, while Protosmasi isn't able to really handle those themes very effectively, it still, I think, does more to make a world that feels real. And Welcome to Forever is an intriguing premise and really thought-provoking, but it just feels like, having read this other book, that there's this fundamental aspect that is kind of naively ignored as an inevitable reality of this futurist world if we have not addressed existing in this capitalist oppressive system, which there's no reason to suspect that's happened. That's not a conversation that's had at all. And for me, on a personal level, I just can't separate that being fresh in my mind. So it really sort of feeds into this idea of this book, as thought-provoking as it is, being a missed opportunity, a chance to discuss something bigger, to address these topics or address more with the world that Nathan Towers has really quite excellently crafted. This book is, I think, really competently designed, both in the writing style, I already said how much I loved his style, but also I think in the world itself and the technology. It's really intriguing, and I think there's a lot of depth to it, to the extent that it's at times confusing. It's still very intelligently crafted, and so there's that much to enjoy here. But ultimately, unfortunately, it's just a good book, if not a great one, because of that sort of shortcoming. I feel kind of bad for this book because while I feel confident in my feelings about the issues I had with it, I also recognize that towards the end of the book, where I started to have these feelings, I was just not in a good headspace to read. I went on a 1 week or more long vacation. I basically didn't read at all. If I did try to read, I was really distracted, and I tried my best to identify when that was happening, to stop it so I could make sure I was giving the book the attention it needs, that I need to really understand it. But ultimately, that likely fed into my feelings of recognizing that it's not quite doing what I want it to, and also kind of feel like it kind of dragged on. I feel like it could have been a bit shorter, and that the ending, I just feel like I went through like the first 3 quarters, and we get introduced to a major character who I can't say who they are because it'll really, I think, spoil when it goes. And it was at this point that I began to realize that the direction that Towers is taking this isn't what I wanted. The idea of identity and self and whether or not we can be who we are, I just wasn't satisfied with that conversation. And ultimately, I think that is a really personal feeling that I had. Whether or not you should read it, I think so. I think it's still a very compelling book, very well written. I will absolutely pick up more by Nathan Towers, and hopefully I'll enjoy those more, and also hopefully I can get through it without being distracted by just personal life stuff, which happens. It's true that I found the book sort of lacking in some ways, but I think there's still a lot to enjoy and really reflect on. And while you may feel the same way I did about could have done more, I don't want to make it sound like it's not still plenty here to love. I think part of the reason I feel overly critical about this book, or I feel the need to hone so much of this review on that critique, is because of that intense excitement that I had when I started this book. That thrill and just immersion that I had within the world and within this writing style, to ultimately not see that brought to completion is just so disappointing on a very, again, personal level. A lot of my critiques here I feel like are somewhat personal, and you may feel differently. Another reason why I think you should probably give it a shot. This book is published by Titan Books. I should mention Titan Books and NetGalley writes an e-arc of this. I did listen also to the audio book. I'll comment here that I really loved the narrator's emotion throughout the novel. It's extremely effective at bringing me more into the story. I was not a big fan of some of his voices. There was one voice that was a major character who was extremely Chad, and I just wasn't a fan of that Chad voice. And another one who was the main character, like between the thoughts, it's like we had this voice which was clearly whenever this main character was talking or thinking, and then we had the voice of what seemed to be the narrator's primary voice throughout, like, the in-between narration. I just wondered, why is it that we're getting this voice, which, to give it the best comparison, I think almost like a Batman voice, like this artificial grunge that's being added to it. And I wish I could say that this could have easily been a favorite narrator. It wasn't for those voices. And it's not usually what I do here, talk about audiobooks, but I do want to talk about that because I think it also sort of fed into my love of the book early on, was the fact that the narrator was just really effective, if a little weird in his choices of how he chose to narrate some of the voices. So there's all my thoughts on Welcome to Forever. Let me know if you might give this book a shot. I'm finding myself loving Titan Books. I actually think they're one of my favorite publishers right now, with just how queer and thought-provoking the speculative fiction is. But those are my thoughts on Welcome to Forever. I hope you get something from this review, one way or the other. And if you liked the video, give it a like. And if you want to hear more reviews or book conversations from me, feel free to subscribe. I'm trying something new with, promoting my channel. Thanks everyone for watching. I really appreciate your time, especially sticking here to the end. And I really do appreciate it. Other than that, have a great day and stay safe.